So the whole, like, you can't prescribe a peptide, whatever, I don't think that's right. That completely obliterates that patient-doctor relationship. Doctors went to school to make people better. Everyone is different.
Hey everyone, thanks for tuning in to the First Optimal podcast. Here with Dr. Smith, really excited from Modern Endocrine, and really pumped to have her on today. We've had a lot of great conversations, and as always, we want to bring to you some of the best guests. They're super busy, but we keep bugging them long enough, and eventually we can try to squeeze them on for everybody to check them out. But we're going to dive into all kinds of topics today. A lot of deep dives on gut health, women's health, hormones, all the fun stuff. But thanks so much for joining us.
Thanks for having me.
So we were, let's see, where do we even start? Lots of conversation we had, but I think one of the things I like to often kick off with is just understanding people's journey, because, you know, getting to know you the last couple of days and looking at a lot of what you do, you know, you're doing a lot of different things in the space, bringing a lot of great value, working with other clinicians, as we were talking about, as well as a you know, chief medical officer of other places, and you have your own business. You have your book coming up, which we'll get into, about gut health. Really excited to talk about that. I'm curious, like, what was that transition for you, like, that got you into the medical field, and then eventually going into your own practice and more of the education / functional medicine provider that you are today?
Yeah, I think that's a good question. I think, like, most people that are in this space, kind of like you and a lot of people I've met, it was by way of sort of an accident, but almost like I was a patient as well, right? So I always knew I wanted to be a doctor whenever I was younger. I grew up in a pretty small town in Missouri. There wasn't a lot to do there besides make boats and Lee jeans, and I didn't want to do either. I also was not a big farm hand person, and so I was like, I got to do something. And I was always just very fascinated with, like, why do people get sick? Why do animals get sick? How do you make them better? I always loved science, and so I always knew I wanted to be a doctor. And so thankfully had the opportunity to be a doctor, despite the fact that my high school counselor told me that I should pick another career because no one in my family went to college and I was not smart enough to go to medical school.
Good
But
motivation.
yeah, they wouldn't help me write my letter of it, like letters to go to college, because they didn't think that the career path that I chose was right for me. So I was pretty stubborn even as a child. I was like, well, that's not going to work for me. So anyways, I ended up getting into med school, thankfully. And when I was in medical school, I actually got sick. And so I developed Graves' disease, which is an autoimmune process where your thyroid overworks. So opposite of Hashimoto's. And I just remember, I mean, it's a terrible experience if you've ever had it, but I remember going to an endocrinologist and they were just like, well, you're going to take this medicine and you'll feel better. And I didn't. And so I went back, they put me on methimazole, and then they said, okay, well, we're just going to kill your thyroid. We're just going to ablate it. And I remember thinking, like, I feel like this gland is probably really important. You know, I've been through physiology by this point. I don't feel like that's the right answer. And they were just very, you know, traditional medicine box of like, well, the medicine didn't work. I had some side effects. So we're just going to kill your thyroid. And I would ask questions like, well, can I change my diet? Can I do anything differently? No, you just have to take this medicine. And I was still stubborn and I didn't like that answer. And so I kind of was looking for I wasn't a great patient, I guess. I was looking for a different answer. And then I got sick in a different way and I developed insulin resistance and I had PCOS. And so I've been through like the gamut of endocrinology. I ended up with Hashimoto's, so the total opposite. And so I just was sick while I was going through training and residency in med school. And then even when I graduated and I went to fellowship and I was an actual endocrinologist, I still struggled with getting people to listen to me and take me seriously and answer my questions. And so like I was not only in the system as a patient, but also then I graduated with an endocrinology fellowship and I did exactly what I was supposed to do by the book, you know, the guidelines, the FDA guidelines and the Endocrine Society guidelines. And after even 6 months, you know, I remember going home and telling my husband, I've had 13 years of higher education. I've been taking care of people for 6 months and they still just get sicker. And I give them more medicine and they get fatter and it costs more money. And I just was so frustrated for myself, but also for patients, right? Because every time I went to the doctor, it was like something else, like, oh, now you have this, and oh, now you have this, you should take this pill. And it's like, well, every time I brought up diet or anything else, nobody wanted to talk about it. And so it just kind of got to this breaking point where in 2020, the worst, possible time ever. So March 1st of 2020, I decided I was going to leave traditional medicine. I was just going to jump off a cliff. I was going to start my own practice in Oklahoma City. Oklahoma is one of the least healthy states in the country, if you didn't know that. And I was going to start a functional medicine practice. So I just quit my job. My husband about lost his mind. I had $500,000 in student loans. Quit my job and I started a functional medicine practice. And then 6 days later, literally the world started to shut down.
Oh.
But I think that, I did it because I had this conviction inside of me that something wasn't right with what I was doing. I'm a very moral person. Moral and ethics are very important to me. And I went into medicine for the right moral and ethical reasons, but I wasn't seeing the results I wanted to see with patients. And I surely didn't get them with myself. And so that's kind of what started my journey in March of 2020 was hey, I literally at that point was about 16 or 17 years into traditional medicine. And I wasn't better. I was getting sicker. And I just, I did the fellowship. I did everything you could possibly do because I'm a rule follower. And so at that point I was morally and ethically, this is not better. And so I'm going to do something different. And so that's kind of where my story got started. Quit my job, stopped working at the hospital, started my own practice. The world shut down very quickly. I worked every day during COVID. So the people who complain about COVID, I went to work every single day. Never took a day off. But thankfully through all that, I found patients that trusted me and allowed me to learn with them. And I started doing functional medicine training and just, I've been blessed to take care of thousands and thousands of patients and have learned this through trying to heal myself and other people.
No, that's great. I mean, and I would imagine too, right? Oklahoma, I think, was a little earlier. It opened up, if I remember correctly, at least in the health club space, because I think they had Tulsa was I remember there was a club in Tulsa with the company I was in that they were one of the first ones to open. How was it with the being able to see you? Was it deemed still what do they call it?
Necessary.
Necessary. Thank you.
Yeah, it was interesting. So, as I reflect on it, because I'm just turning 42. And so I'm doing a lot of self-reflecting, 30s, anyways, as I reflect on it, definitely there was a lot of operating out of fear, right? Because I'm oh my gosh. But thankfully, yes, people could still come to my office. And a lot of them did, because also since I was an endocrinologist, I still had a lot of diabetic patients. And diabetic patients were the ones who were the most fearful, right? They wanted their blood sugars controlled. They didn't want to die. So I actually still had quite a few patients came to the office, but I just shifted and started doing telehealth. I think it was doxy.me. We started doing telehealth, navigated that situation with just my local patients. But for the most part, there was a week or two where nobody did anything, but Oklahoma did open back up pretty quickly. And so thankfully, it wasn't as bad as it could have been. And it gave me some time to kind of figure things out. But just, I still knew, I had this conviction, this is the right thing to do. And I remember, so I started in March, and then in about June, July, when things were a little better, people were coming around, I was seeing people again. And I was already by June and July hearing from people oh, I'm actually better. And a lot of my patients followed me and they would say, oh my gosh, in the last 3 months, I've been better than the last 3 years you took care of me, And so it was pretty quickly I saw, oh, wow, not adding medications every time you see someone, talking to them about diet and nutrition and sleep and their gut, this actually helps, hormones. So thankfully it just kind of, I think that whatever higher power you want to believe in, I believe in God, but put things in my path just in the right time where they were supposed to be. And I just kept having, just enough light to just keep believing and going in a really hard time. And it all worked itself out, thankfully. And then in 2024, I actually built a clinic here in Oklahoma City. And my goal of building it was, I said to my husband, I want to build a place that I wish existed 20 years ago when I got sick. and I want it to be beautiful, and I want people to come in and feel welcome and warm, and I want to have everything there to treat them. And so that was kind of always my goal in starting a practice. Just financially couldn't do it until 2024. And now thankfully we have this wonderful facility where literally you can come and heal yourself no matter what you need to do in the functional medicine space. So that was kind of my goal, and we finally have it, and it's super awesome.
Yeah, no, that's great. Yeah, and I just, for those out there who don't fully understand the level of commitment and work put into where you are today with your education, can you walk through how much like formal education it was to do the, up to the end of the fellowship in endocrinology, and then you also did additional training outside of that functional med? So I think a lot of common people, they hear doctor and they just, not that doing a traditional primary care is a fair amount of education and knowledge, but this is a whole nother level we're talking here. So I think it's important for people to understand, so as we get into some of these nuanced topics, they understand the level of expertise that you have and commitment you have.
Yeah, that's a good point. So right after high school, if you're going to be a physician, you go to undergrad, right? You go to college, you get a 4-year education. I was lucky enough to get actually accepted into, in the United States, when I went to medical school, there was about 6 programs that they had what was called a combined MD, undergrad MD program. I got accepted to one of those right out of high school. And so you kind of got your undergrad degree in 2 years, and then you got your MD, or you did your med school in 4. So I kind of signed up in May of 2004. Like, hey, I'm going to go to med school for the next, 6 years. So typically what happens though is you graduate high school, you go to undergrad for 4 years in whatever college you want to go to, and then you apply for medical school. And it's difficult to get into medical school. You have to take, tests, etc. But I ended up in a program where I did 2 years of undergrad. I went year round. You have to take more hours. I had to take more hours, like 18 to 21 hours in the fall and spring, and then about 12 to 15 hours in the summer. But I got my undergrad degree, and then 4 years of medical school. And medical school, all of it is very different, but it's very intense. So it's like you're learning more science, you're learning more physiology. How does the body work? Biochemistry, pharmacology, kind of putting it all together. And typically while you're going to medical school, those next 4 years, so you've got 4 years of undergrad and then 4 years of medical school, you're in addition to that doing what's called clinical rotations, where you go to clinics or you go to hospitals. And those are the med students that come in whenever you're on rotations, and, they're just like kind of shadowing, watching, whatever. They're kind of getting exposed to that. Like, what is it like to take care of patients? Because you have to remember, a lot of these med students are 22, 23 years old. Mm-hmm. And so they're dealing with very complex life issues at that age. And so getting them in there and just kind of allowing them to see that and have their feels. And it's pretty interesting. A lot of kids will actually drop out of medical school in the first 1 to 2 years because they're just, sometimes I think they're not emotionally old enough, mature enough to deal with the fact that you have to go tell someone their family's dying, some of the difficult things you have to do. But I went to undergrad, typically 4 years. I did it in 2. Then I went to 4 years of medical school. Then after that, you graduate, you're technically a doctor, right? Like one day you're a student, the next day you're a doctor. But in order to practice medicine in the United States, then you have to pick a field. Like, what do you want to do, right? Do you want to do primary care? Do you want to do surgery? Do you want to do ophthalmology? And then you actually have to go do what's called an internship and a residency. Meaning, yes, I'm a doctor. I'm legally allowed to be a doctor, but you have to go work and be supervised, like a supervised training program under other doctors, where you practice basically being a doctor for anywhere from 3 to 7 years, depending on what you choose to do. So if you choose to do primary care or any sort of specialty that takes care of patients like that, like GI, cardiology, pulmonology, dermatology, endocrinology, you have to go do a 3-year training. It's called residency, where you go work at typically an underserved inner city hospital. You make less than people who work at less than waitresses. I mean, it's like less than minimum wage. You work at whatever. I went through school 80 to 100 plus hours a week. And you just learn. You take care of people, right? You admit them from the hospital. You go to clinic. So I did that for 3 years. And then after that, I'm considered an internal medicine doctor, right? I graduated from school, I have my degree, and I did my training proving I'm not going to kill anyone, right? Like, you take care of thousands and thousands of patients, somebody's overseeing it. You prove that not only are you book smart, but you can actually take care of a patient. So that's a 3-year journey. And then when I finished that, I did what's called a chief residency year, where then I was like in charge of 100+ doctors that were training. And I made sure that none of them killed anyone. And I made sure I helped them learn and take care of patients in the hospital and in the clinics. And I did that because I just felt like it was something really important to do, like giving back to some of the, the people who helped me. And I also just kind of always had that like desire to just like, I don't know, be motherly towards people. So I did that for a year. I don't know whether that was a good or bad decision, but I did it. And then after that, I went to what's called fellowship. So then I went into another 2 years where there were doctors that were actual endocrinologists who had went through more training, kind of looked over me and 9 of the other people I was in school with, and they made sure we were doing direct endocrinology care. So like thyroid care, diabetes care in clinics and in the hospital, thyroid biopsies, hormone care. And they watched us take care of patients for 2 more years to prove that, hey, I'm learning all this extra stuff about hormones and thyroid and diabetes. You have to typically do in that training a very large research project. And so my research was on GLP-1s. So doing clinical trials with GLP-1s and SGLT2. So if any of you are familiar with I just lost it, Jardiance. If you're familiar with Jardiance, I helped with that study and then with Ozempic. And so you have to do that. Like you have to kind of help with clinical trials and make sure you understand how the drug companies and markets work while you're doing this 2-year training. And then you're done. And then it's like, okay, now you can go practice medicine on your own. So that's all the training that I did just to get out of school and be like an endocrinologist, right? You also have to pass boards, to take 2 sets of boards. And then I practiced medicine like that, how I learned traditional medicine in, fellowship and residency and training, this doctrine that they give you about you have to follow these guidelines and the FDA says this and you should write all these medicines. I practiced that way for almost 3 years. And then I said, you know what, this is kind of baloney. No one's getting better. And I think a lot of this care is dictated towards pharmaceuticals and some things that maybe don't make people better. And so then I decided I'm going to go back and do some more training in functional medicine. And so then that restarts the path of like, okay, now you know all this about the human body, but how do we start incorporating things like nutrition and movement and sunlight and gut health and meridian lines and stress? Because although those things sound like they would teach you that in 13+ years of higher education, I had maybe 1 lecture on nutrition and it was like an hour and that was it. So, and then you have to try to figure out, how do I put all this together cohesively where I know I'm taking really good care of people, I'm not harming anyone, and I'm also trying to stay in these guidelines of like my society and my board says I should be doing this. And, so it's kind of difficult, but hopefully that answers your question. It's a lot.
Well, I stopped count at 13 years and it sounds like there's some other stuff after that for the functional medicine. Yeah. So yeah, a couple other questions on that. And so, cause I guess did you always know endocrinology was the path, or does that the journey as you were having these issues in med school and then decided like, all right, like I'm going to push down. Cause that's a huge commitment. And like you said, 100 hours. This is tough, not making money, no reward there. So I think a lot of people see the doctor 20 years after med school who's successful and it's like, oh yeah, they have everything given to them. It's like, no.
No, honestly, if I would have not went to medical school, I would probably be, I tell people I would be in a better financial situation than I am now, because you start 15 years after everyone else and $500,000 in debt, right? And if you know anything about money, it compounds over time. So if I would have had a regular job just saving money, 15 years compounded interest, you're doing pretty good. But that's a whole nother discussion. So the reason I chose endocrinology was very interesting. It sort of chose me again. I had all these like issues when I was going through med school residency, and I thought, I was actually kind of flustered with endocrinologists and I sort of hated them. So I didn't think that's what I wanted to do, because I was like, these people are a bunch of idiots, right? But then when I did that year where I just kind of was helping other residents, called the chief residency year, part of the reason I did that year was because I felt in my heart that like, I don't really know what I want to do. I think I want to do primary care, but I feel like I'm being called to do something else. And I was just having this unease of like, I'm not sure what I'm supposed to do. Right. And so I kind of reflected on it and I thought, well, maybe if I spend more time in the hospital, not so stressed about whether I'm going to pass this test or pass this board, and I just help other people learn, it will come to me, like what I'm supposed to do. And again, I believe in faith. And so I was like, I'm just going to do this. And so when I was doing it, it became very clear very quickly. I kept having these endocrinology type cases that were coming up, and I was still struggling with a few things. And I would say prayers and be like, I need to know what am I supposed to do? Because I feel like the first 32 years of my life, I was just so I was determined to be a doctor, and you're just in it and you're in the thick of it. And it's if you step back out of the frame, sometimes you can tell. And so as soon as I paused and got back out of the frame and asked, questions, it was very clear. I was shown multiple ways, you need to be an endocrinologist. And so I think that's how, I was like, okay, I want to be able to take care of myself. I want to be able to take care of people like me. There were just several patients that I had along the way that were like, you would be a really good endocrinologist. And so that's how I ultimately did it. And I was kind of late determining what I wanted to do, to be honest with you. And you have to apply for these things. And so I hadn't really done it per se, in a timely manner. And so I was like, well, there's this fellowship in Oklahoma City at the Harold Ham Diabetes Center, and they did a lot of research with GLP-1s and diabetes stuff. So I applied for it, and I really was interested in doing a certain type of research. And I was like, well, I'll apply for it, but that will never happen, right? And the person that was accepting and looking through the applications was looking for somebody to do the exact type of research I wanted to do. And so they called me on the phone, and they actually went to college, the same place I went to college. We kind of just hit it off. And so I think I got lucky. And so again, I think it was just this again, very faith-based, that's just where I was supposed to be. So
no, I appreciate you sharing that, because it's one of those things. And, if people have other belief systems, that's their deal. But I think, even for us, my wife and I, when we came up with the name First Optimal, we talked about a little bit yesterday and what it means, to other people. What it means externally to people is call a time out, put yourself first, take care of your health so you can better serve your friends, family, communities. It's part of our mission. For my wife and I, probably more me than her, it's, are we putting Jesus first in all that we do when we run our business and we interact with people? So it's as I tell people, I report to someone much higher than a human. So I'm accountable at a whole nother level. I'm not perfect, but so I really appreciate you sharing that, because, it's, I think it's just really cool how you wake up 10, 20 years later and you're like, oh, this is what you meant. You were laughing at me the whole time I was freaking out. You're not laughing.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? You're like,
and actually, you know what I thought I wanted to do initially? I thought I wanted to be an oncologist. I wanted to deal with cancer patients, because I just really loved that aspect. As weird as that sounds, I really liked being there for people when they were really, really ill, and just kind of helping them walk through that phase of life. I don't know why. It's sad, but it never really killed me like it kills a lot of people, because I feel like it can be a part of life where you're very, you just help somebody really get through something in their life that they need to. It can be a very respectful journey. And I really, really liked it. And so I thought I was going to be an oncologist, but then when I stepped back out of the picture and I was like, tell me what I'm supposed to do with my life. To your point, I believe I'm here for higher reasons. What we do on this earth echoes in the walls of eternity. I believe that forever. And so I just kind of stepped back, and that was what was brought to me. And then, like I said, just by the time I decided it was almost too late. So I thought, well, maybe he's just joking, right? I'll send this application. And then when I sent it, I got a phone call within 24 hours. And then the person was talking to me, and then we connected on where we went to school, and then he loved me. And after the fact, by the way, what's so funny is when I got accepted to fellowship here and I went, the secretary was like, what did you say to him? And I'm like, what do you mean? And she's like, he doesn't like anyone. And he's kind of hateful, and he loved you and pretty much hired you on the spot. And I was like, I didn't even say anything to him. So it's just interesting. So I just felt very at ease, and this is probably what I need to do. And then if you would have told me this is where I would be 10 years ago when that happened, I would be like, you're crazy. So, I think part of, interestingly, as I get older and reflect, I think what people need to know too is sometimes in life, you're never always in control. Just so you know, you're never always in control. Life's going to give you what you're supposed to have. And if you fight it and don't listen to it, it's just going to be more difficult, but you're going to end up back in the same place. Right. So I think just trying to take what life gives you, take it, turn it into the best that you can, and know that it's probably there for ultimately a higher reason that you don't even know, is what's really cool. Because I had no clue 10 years ago this is what I would be doing. I had no clue I would actually be affecting people's lives and making them better, because I was just in a really bad headspace of like, medicine is really warped and it sucks. But I don't know, that's where I am now, and it's really cool.
No, I'm curious. One last personal anecdote, and then I want to get into the meat of the stuff. So I'm really curious your opinion on some things, or your expertise on some things. But because my wife and I worked a lot, and we met in the corporate setting, and it was funny. I filled in for a class she was in. I was in a different role, and I just filled in, and then she was helping me. I had this crazy idea, like I'm actually gonna be a good triathlete, which I'm not built to be a triathlete. So she was coaching me, and that's how we met. But with all those hours, all the work, how did your husband integrate into that? Is he in the medical field? How did you guys meet?
That's a good question. No, he's not in the medical field. I moved to Oklahoma City, and I didn't know a single human being here because I got that job offer so like quickly, unexpectedly. I actually had never even been to Oklahoma City. I drove through here as a kid, and I actually made a comment to my dad. He reminded me of this when I took this job. We drove through Oklahoma City from Lebanon, Missouri, where I live. We were driving to LA. When you go from Lebanon to Oklahoma City, it's one highway, 44. You take 44 west to Oklahoma City, and then you have to get on I-40 in Oklahoma City. It takes you all the way to California. The I-40 connection in Oklahoma City, people that live here will attest to this, is a train wreck. And we missed it like 3 times. And I made the comment of, this is the stupidest set up city in the world. Why would anyone want to live here? When I was a kid, and here I am. But I had never even been here. And so when I moved here to take this job, I was like, literally knew no one, right? And I was just like grinding, working super hard. And I was actually working 2 jobs when I first moved here to try to pay some of that student loan back, because as a resident, you make very little money, and I had a very high student loan payment. And so I was moonlighting or working on the weekends at the VA. And so I was just working a lot. And I actually met my husband on Match.com. And it's interesting because we met on Match. We matched really well. I thought we would be a great, match. And then he asked me on a date 3 times. And 3 times I either stood him up or said no, because I had to work. And I was working so much, he thought I was lying to him. So he finally got mad. And he was like, I'm not going to talk to this girl because she won't go on a date with me. But this was when Snapchat first started, and it wasn't bad like it is now. I don't have it anymore, but it used to just be like funny. I had Snapchat, and he had friended me on Snapchat, and he would see little posts that I was making on Snapchat or whatever. And so he would give little like digs every now and then. And then one night, I actually wasn't working for the first time in a really long time. And I was hungry, and I didn't have anything in my house. This is awful, but I'm going to tell you the truth. And he had made me kind of mad because he had made some comments about like, you're just ignoring me. You don't even really work hard, yada, yada, yada. And I was hungry, and he said, I have tickets to the Thunder game, which I was like, I've never been to the Thunder because I'm like a poor resident, right? And I'll take you to Mahogany, which is this steakhouse downtown Oklahoma State that's like super nice, if you want to go with me. And I was thinking in my mind, because the devil was being funny that day, I was like, you know what? I'm going to make this guy take me to Mahogany and give me a nice steak dinner and wine. And I'm going to go to the game with him because I would never do this for myself, because he was mean to me. And then I'm never going to talk to him again. That's what I thought. And so we actually met, and then he's a sweetheart. And so that's how we met.
There you go. Yeah.
He was mean to me at first. So
that's awesome. Well, I mean, he thought he was getting blown off. So, I could see why. No.
Then he figured it out, though. He was like, oh, I didn't realize that people, to your point, I didn't realize people in the medical field work 80, 100, 120 hours a week. And so, when you are home, you're like, I just want to sleep.
Right. No, our situation was a little different, but I won't waste too much viewer time on it. It was just basically something about her yelling at me from the pool deck because she was a swim coach, and I was doing she's like, I'll help you with your lessons. I'm like, why was that? What was I thinking?
You liked it?
Yeah, something about that. And then as soon as our first date, the next day I get in the pool, and she did, like, not because of me. She got me pretty good at swimming, and I was terrible. And she goes, all right, let's go. You're like, time to go, blows the whistle. And I looked at her, I was like, no, not doing it. She's like, are you kidding me? She's like, all this work goes to crap now. I just wouldn't listen to her. As soon as we crossed,
you wouldn't let her coach you anymore?
I mean, I was tired. I was like, I'm not going to go. I was like, no. But before that, it was just all out. Whatever she said, I did in the pool. Like, let's go. And then Yeah, first date done. I couldn't.
It's because you really liked her and you just didn't know you liked her and you were trying to
Exactly.
impress her, right? Well,
Exactly.
and I'll tell you this is interesting. So if men are listening to this, I'll tell you this. Actually, the first date I went on with my husband, that was the thought I had. And then that night, I thought in my brain, you know what? I might marry this guy. And this is why. I have never, as an adult woman at the time, saw a guy, my husband is just like a gentleman, open the door for every woman that I saw that night. I mean, like the front door to the restaurant, open the car door for me. And then this, like literally the next time I saw him, it was weird, but my family was in town. And so my mom and grandma, we were going to go somewhere. He opened the door, like the car door for my grandma first, and then my mom, and then myself. And to this day, 12 years later, I've never seen him not open the car door for a woman or open the door for any woman that's around him. And I was just like, that's pretty cool, right?
Yep. So I tell my girls, they open the door, they got to go.
Because no man before that ever did that for me.
Yeah,
and
that's awesome.
I guess that's on me, but like, it's just, and he still does it. And it's just embedded in him, which I think is pretty sexy.
Good. There you go. Good upbringing there. Good stuff.
Yeah.
Well, so we established your expertise now. And so I want to get into the weeds a little bit more with, like, you know, gut health, your book coming out, and just kind of all of your findings there, as well as hormones. But I was curious first, and for everyone viewing, we'll keep politics aside because I know sometimes it can be polarizing topics. I'll just give that disclaimer. This is more of a medical topic, not a political one. Unfortunately, in today's day, I have to say that. But I'm curious with what's going on, you know, with the FDA and the removal of the black box warning on estrogen that, you know, was called months ago. There's recently on the Joe Rogan podcast, RFK Jr. was talking about bringing back certain peptides. I'm just curious, like, what is your take as an expert in the field on, I guess, twofold, like, however you want to call it, like women's health specifically in the medical field and or medical field in general? Like, do you think are these signs of heading in the right direction? Is it just kind of too soon to tell, or hey, I think it's just another day in the field? I mean, like, what is your take on some of these things that we non-medical folks, you know, hear about social media or the news or podcasting that's happening?
Yeah, that's a great question. You know, I actually had the privilege of seeing and meeting Marty McCary in November of last year. And I hope that it's hard to tell, but I think that we're going in the right direction. You know, I had a conversation with him, and I think that part of the problem is, you know, there's so many layers to fixing this. If you're not in the medical field, it's hard to understand, but you know, you've got the FDA that are sitting there saying, you know, we are here to make people safe, which I understand the point of the FDA, right? You don't want somebody just saying, hey, let's put millions of people on something when it's not safe. But in order to get things safe by the FDA, it costs millions and millions of dollars. And usually the people who put the money out to do that are pharmaceutical companies, and they have an agenda. Whether they say they do or not, they have an agenda, right? They are a business. They have to make money, and it costs them millions, if not billions of dollars to get a drug to market. And some of these drugs we need, and some of them we might not. And so there's just so many things interwoven in healthcare now that I think it's really difficult. And then you have people making decisions about healthcare, with all due respect, that have no clue because they don't take care of patients, right? And this is what I respectively told him when I met him was, you know, I think that what you guys are doing you're going in the right direction. I love that you took the black box warning off of estrogen. I love that we're talking about peptides. Just so you know, in clinical practice, estrogen and peptides completely change and transform the lives of thousands and thousands of patients that I personally have taken care of as one provider. So I think that they're getting that data from people because there are people like you and I and some of my friends who are really just in their ear and in the space. But it's just really hard to make all those points sync up, right? And sometimes they have people in power making decisions who, even though they're called a doctor, they don't take care of patients anymore. Right. And so that's not right either, because I feel like you need the input of people who are actually on the ground doing this, you know? So to answer your question, I think that the current administration has done more for women's health and taking away, you know, the ban on peptides than we've done in the past. So I appreciate that. We have a lot of ground to make up because for years, you know, women have been put on the back burner. But I feel like hopefully we are going in the right direction. I don't think it's right, no matter how you slice it, that anyone tell a doctor how they should treat or take care of a patient at all. So the whole like, you can't prescribe a peptide, you can't like whatever. I don't think that's right. That completely obliterates that patient doctor relationship. Doctors went to school to make people better. Everyone is different. Just because the indoctrination that you learn in med school is not practiced on every patient, that should be okay, because sometimes that indoctrination is behind or not right. So I have a very, very, you know, a strong opinion on this. Some people might not want to hear it, but I've helped thousands and thousands of people get better. And it's because I have a conversation with that patient and I do what the patient and I feel like is right for the patient, despite what guidelines and other people tell me to do. And I just hope that that never changes, because if so, we're going to be in a really bad spot in this country.
Yeah, no, I appreciate your insights. And I had a couple follow-ups too. One was, and I have a good friend who works in research, and so they're way more articulate than I am with this question. But one of the things as a novice, if you will, not in the field, is it because, specifically with peptides, is it because the pharmaceutical industry doesn't really have a strong enough way? And I'll give some examples of ways I think they found it as an outside observer, so you may correct me, but to patent these things, so they can't really control them because a lot of them are more naturally occurring in the body, et cetera. Is that kind of where the gap is, where there's not the funding to push it through these regulatory bodies because there's not, the control on the end of it to profit or get their money back, et cetera. Is that a barrier that or is that something that you're just not as close to? I'm just curious what your thoughts are.
I'm sure that that's part of it, right? I'm sure that the pharmaceutical companies, if they can't patent it and have sole propriety on it, then they're not going to do studies that cost hundreds of millions of dollars. And a lot of these peptides, to your point, are hormones that your body naturally makes, or amino acid sequences that your body naturally makes. And so it probably is more difficult to patent it. And then, so they're going to say, well, I'm not going to spend $100 million doing a study, because then I can make it and Joe Blow down the street can make it, and multiple companies can make it. And this is where healthcare has become frustrating, because it's like, if you're going to make it so that you can't give people things that could potentially make them better without doing a $100 million, $200 million study, then where does the money come in to do those studies when we know anecdotally that it's helping millions and millions of people, right? So this is where, from a doctor's perspective, it's really frustrating. And this is why I think that doctor-patient relationship is so important, and that, they're just going to have to trust doctors. Like, hey, we're doing this for the right reason. We're giving people what we feel is making them better. Thankfully, no one's gotten 3 heads in my practice from anything that I've done. And so it's just, it's an interesting concept, and I see all sides of it. But I also feel like, in order for things to continue to move forward in healthcare, they really need to sit down at the table with not only, the FDA or whoever, but they need to really get people in there who do this every day, who can tell them, hey, from a clinical perspective, this is what we're seeing. And then we need to put our heads together and figure out how, from a clinical perspective, do we do these studies to make the FDA happy, to make patients happy, to make everyone know, like, hey, nothing bad is happening here. And how do we do it with providers who are out there doing it and showing that we actually have good outcomes? We shouldn't just be the pharmaceutical companies that are responsible for doing the studies either. But to your point, it's like, well, who's going to pay for all this, right? Yeah. The compounding pharmacies aren't going to do it. So this is where, like, we've got to get together and come up with a different way of healthcare, because what we've done so far is not working.
Yeah. Right? Yeah. No. And one of the reasons why it popped in my head too, because I was, and just, I guess, anecdotal conversation here, but like, I'm sure you've heard of, PT 141. Like, I was walking through my primary care and saw the I'm probably gonna pronounce it wrong. I can't even talk. You can say it. Why can't I say it?
The PT 141.
PT 141. But I saw the actual name of it, on the thing. And I was like, I know what that is. And I'm like, huh. And that was FDA approved. And I just found that interesting. Like, okay, like, so now clearly someone saw a market there with that, because before it was like black market, can't use it. I just kind of heard about it on the fringes. And then it was like in my primary care's under a different name. And, so it's interesting to see some that are coming through that I guess, I don't know the nuance of how that was. And then others that, do not touch, like you can't use this. And it's like, well, why? Like it's, it seems pretty safe.
Yeah, and some of it I think is, again, like, the FDA has said that maybe pharmaceutical companies are suing because they feel like they own the patent on it. I mean, I think there's a lot of different things. And then, maybe the FDA, there are certain ones that they're saying, hey, we're not sure these are safe for human consumption. I think some of that goes back to who's making them, right? So I think that that's a fair conversation to have too. Like if you are a sterile 503B compounding pharmacy held to certain standards, and we know that these compounds don't hurt you, then, there's another conversation. But then like the pharmaceutical companies don't like that because they want to be in control of, how it's being made and how they price it. And so it's unfortunately become kind of like the wild, wild west. And what we need is, if the government is going to control this and run it, we need somebody to step in and say, okay, this is how we're going to run it. This is how it's going to be done. I don't think that it should be one individual company that's doing it. I don't think that's right, because you can say what you want about drug companies, but like I worked with them for a really long time, right? And if you let one company make something, right, just one, what's going to happen to that thing that they're making? They're going to set the price and it's going to be whatever they want, just like insulin, right? I worked with diabetics for years, and a life-saving medication that you have to take no matter what if you have type 1 diabetes. And somebody sold the patent to insulin in 1923, I believe, for $1 because they said, I want every human to be able to take this, right? Because it's life-saving. Now pharmaceutical companies are making hundreds of millions of dollars a year on. That's not right, right? So interesting. But the patent for insulin was sold for $1 by the person who made it to a pharmaceutical company. And then now look at the price of insulin, and people need it for their life. So it's not fair. And so I think, you've got to sit down and figure out like, how do we maneuver this? How do we make sure that it's safe, make sure the people that are making it are safe, but also make sure that people have what they need to actually get better. And then, there's that whole question too, and we don't have to go down this rabbit hole conspiracy theory, but there's the whole question of, does the government and does the FDA and does hospital companies and does insurance companies even want us to be healthy? Like it's almost like it's become sick care in this country. It's a big business. And so is there any of that involved? Is it like, well, we want to keep people sick? I don't know, but I just try to go to work morally, ethically, practice medicine and try to make people better. But there's a lot of layers to this onion you've got to peel back before we fix it.
Yeah. And I think whenever there's overregulation, like we know it with like prohibition, and you saw it in regardless of someone's views on like marijuana use, like it's whenever there's overregulation or the perception of, people are going to find it. And then it creates another market, which we know is the black market, which you can see with, peptides. And I've just seen so many people come in with, oh yeah, I know it's working because it's burning. I'm like, oh, that's not good. It shouldn't burn. Like, no. Or, they got these bumps and this, it's like, it's scary out there, but I'm getting a little off topic, but I just think it's, to your point though, it's got to be addressed, because there's also overregulation causes this other market to pop up and people are going to find what they want. So it's like, at least give them the option to go to someone like yourself, who's got all this training expertise, work with a, validated compounding pharmacy to source the product correctly. And then, try and get the therapy with informed consent. What's wrong with that? This is supposed to be, a free country. And if they want to do that, like, let them do it. So,
and not only that, but it's your body too. And from a medical perspective, yeah, I mean, if this is something you want to do to be well, and it's just, I don't know, it's frustrating because I feel like sometimes the government just has their hand in so many things, right? Our food and now they're trying to tell doctors how to practice medicine. And there's got to be some separation at some point, in my opinion.
Yeah, no, I appreciate that. I wanted to shift a little bit to nutrition as well, on that same kind of from a national topic, right? Like a big shift was in the food pyramid and the guidelines there. I'm wondering if you have any thoughts on that, agree, disagree? Do you feel like it's heading the right direction?
No. I think this is a great move in the right direction, right? We basically took the food pyramid and we flipped it upside down, which is a big step. right? It's a big step in the government and the FDA and everyone saying, hey, we're not going to let the food companies, we're not going to let anyone give us, monetary incentive to keep it how it was. Now, not to say that that doesn't still happen. I know it probably does more than it should, but I do think it's a step in the right direction of this administration saying, hey, we know that we need to be eating more fruits and vegetables and we need to be eating, so I think that it is a good thing. Again, I try not to look at anyone in general as like being terrible, right? Like I try not to look at people and say, oh, they're for sure just trying to harm people. Sure. I try to have an open mind of like, why is this happening? Yeah. But in medicine, it's hard. And I think the problem is people are losing faith in the medical society very quickly with, I don't know that that's necessarily unwrong, but we need to really, as a society, try to hone this in, try to get the medical society more respected, right? I mean, I don't know if you remember, but when I was a kid, like whatever your doctor said, you did, right? Like you did it. There was no questioning it. You did what your doctor said. And now I'm not saying it's bad that people come in and they have lots of questions for doctors, but it's almost like our entire profession is just not respected anymore. And I hate that. But I think it's because of the mistrust in society. A lot of it has to do with maybe government overreach and just what they're allowing doctors to do and not do, right? And just like right now with desiccated thyroid medication, I don't know if you know about.
That's right, yeah.
Yeah, but I mean, this is huge. Like I had a doctor call me yesterday and was like, oh my gosh, what are you going to do about this? I have hundreds of people on that medicine and I guess I'm just going to start taking them off of it and they're all going to do terrible. And I'm like, well, why are you going to take them off of it? Well, because the FDA said that we had to. I'm like, well, and that's a whole nother discussion. Did they really say that? But it's like, so you have hundreds of people, and I do too, who were taking what the FDA and what the Endocrine Society and what everyone guidelines said you must take, and they took it for years and they didn't get better. You switched them to a different medication. Now they are better. Labs are better. Cholesterol's better. Insulin's better. Everything's better. And now you're just going to switch them back because somebody told you had to when we don't have any studies showing anything's harming them. Like that's a problem, right? So, and then that makes the patient be like, well, that's not fair. That's my choice, And so there's just so many issues, unfortunately, right now in medicine that need to be hammered out.
I know we were talking before about your friend and colleague McCall that I believe there was I don't know if it's still going around, but there was like a petition of some sort about that. So do you know the standing of that? I haven't looked into that recently, but
yeah, I mean, there's 40,000+ signatures on it and it's been submitted. I think what happened is, the FDA made that statement. They never said anything else. They didn't retract it, but they haven't done anything. And so I don't know that nothing's happened, but what it's done is made people really, really concerned because there are millions of people that take those medications and feel better. And they're sitting here saying, well, does that mean in August I can't get my medicine? Like, what am I going to do? This literally changed my lives. I have people calling my office crying. Like before I took this medicine, I literally was a shell of the human that I am. I can't go back there. Like, what am I going to do? And all you can say as a provider is, we hope that doesn't happen. And you can write your Congress people and you can, sign petitions, but that's all we can really do. And that's where I'm saying, people are losing faith in medicine because it should be that the doctor can prescribe you what they feel is right for you. And then if there's an issue, there's a medical board that they report to. And that's a whole nother conversation. But it's just like the government has gotten more and more and more control over, almost making doctors like puppets. Yeah. And the people who make these decisions, and that was my point to Marty McCary when I talked to him, with all due respect, sir, the people that you have making these decisions don't see patients. And so they don't know what they don't know, but I can tell you from seeing these patients what you're doing if you take desiccated thyroid medication from them. If you don't, if you scare women into not taking estrogen, if you scare people into not taking testosterone, if you scare people away from peptides, you're affecting millions, tens, hundreds of millions of people. And that's not fair. Right. So.
Well, and like we said earlier, and then a black market's going to spin up for that type of medication, which it's like, you just slippery slope. But
right, because I'm all about making sure it's made correctly and regulating that and testing it. And like, yes, that's what we need to do. Right. But you shouldn't force people to go get things on a black market, right? Like that when they know, hey, this made me feel better. Right. And
Right.
it would be one thing if it was one or two people, but we're talking about millions of people
Right.
that take desiccated thyroid hormones. So it's not like, you know, so it's interesting.
Well, I wanted to, no, I appreciate your insights on that because I think it's important for people to hear from, practitioner this point of view as well. Because, you hear people on podcasts, you hear politicians, you hear in the news, but to actually hear like boots on the ground, hey, this is my experience, this is what I've seen, and this is what I think. I think it's a really valuable message for people to hear out there. And another perspective I don't think is, I think it's getting better, but I still don't think it's amplified enough. But I did want to transition a little bit to gut health. Just, we were talking a little bit beforehand. You have a book coming out that you started working on in 2024 about gut health. Curious about why did you start going into gut health? And just kind of high level some of your findings there, and then we can get into some more detail and nuanced questions. I'm sure there's gonna be a lot of people interested to hear your take on gut health and all that fun stuff.
Yeah, I think I started getting into gut health. So, 2020, I was like, okay, got to do something functional medicine. Really got into hormones, like understood hormones, sex hormones, really got into optimizing thyroid, then kind of got into insulin and cortisol. And so really kind of dove into all that from a physiologic standpoint, growth hormone. And I was like, okay, yeah, I've got all the hormones, right? I'm a doctor of hormones, have a board certification in understanding all hormones in your body. And I had those hormones figured out in people, right? Like their lab numbers looked good. Things were changing where I knew they were getting better, but still I had people that I couldn't explain why their CRP is high, why their insulin's still high, why, although their numbers have drastically improved, they don't feel it. Like they can't feel it. Like, why can they not feel this hormone that's there? And so I was like, and it wasn't a lot. It was maybe 30% of people, but it was enough that I was like, obviously these 30% of people aren't making this up. Like I don't ever believe a patient comes to me and makes up stuff, right? They have better things to do with their time than pay me money to cry and not feel well. And I mean, so it's like, so then it made me frustrated for them. Like, okay, why don't you feel this hormone that I see is there? So what I realized was when you start talking to those people, a lot of them have very similar symptoms. Bloating, acid reflux, constipation or diarrhea, a lot of gut type symptoms, right? So I really kind of dove into, okay, well, can the gut actually cause these things, right? Like, and there's so much literature, so much. I mean, it's shocking that we're not taught this in school. It's shocking that this is not on the news, that they, but there's so much literature. And if you think about it, you go back 2000 plus years, Hippocrates, who was the father of medicine, was saying, let food be thy medicine and medicine be thy food. And like was talking about the gut 2000 years ago. And then somehow we just lost all of that. Yeah. And we never talk about it now. So I did some research. It made sense to me that when your gut is out of balance, all the things that happen, your bad bacteria produce certain things called lipopolysaccharide that are very inflammatory that cause us to get holes in our gut. And when we have holes in our gut, our food leaks out of our gut. And when that happens, our immune system comes and attacks that food because it doesn't know what it is. It releases something called cytokines. It basically just sends our army, our immune system, to freak out every time that we eat, which drives up our cortisol and drives up our insulin, which causes us to be inflamed. And so all this made sense to me as I read about it, because I was like, from a physiologic standpoint, this is it. Like, this is why people don't feel well, right? Because they're inflamed. And when we're inflamed, hormones can't get into cells. And so that's what kind of got me on this path. And then I was just like, once I'm in, I'm in. Like, I don't do anything halfway. Just a trait that my father taught me as a child. I'm not sure how to do things. You either do them
I think
correctly.
That's stuck. I think it's fair to say it's fair to say that that's stuck.
Yeah. When you either do it correctly, you do it right, or you don't. And so I went all in, and that's how the book came about, because I just kept learning. And I was like, and then I almost felt bad, because I remember thinking, wow, I'm 38 years old. I've been taking care of people for, I graduated when I was 24, but really taking care of people for 10 plus years now. And I never knew that this is how it all like went together. Right. And so then I almost felt obligated. Like I have this book I read out of, it has daily devotional in it. And it was pretty funny because I was learning all these things in 2024. And then I almost got really upset one night when I went to sleep. I was very upset with myself, thinking like, wow, I've strung people along for 10 years and I haven't even told them everything that could make them better. And almost just feeling bad about it to myself. And then the next morning I woke up and I was reading my devotional, and it was talking about how sometimes God doesn't teach us what he wants to teach us until it's the perfect time. And once you know it's the perfect time, then you act on it. And then it was talking about this part of the Bible where when you know better, you do better. And then you tell stories. And I was like, huh. And I was like, maybe I should write a book. Like, it just popped into my head. And then I was kind of fired up about it. And so I was like, I'm just going to see what happens. And I wrote a book.
There you go.
and it was really good. So that's how it all kind of happened.
Yeah. And I just want to pull that up a little bit. And so fix your gut, fix your hormones. So people out there might say, what gut hormones? What are you talking about? Gut is gut. Like, what do you mean? So just, if you can give a little bit of high level kind of input on that. I think just what are things you found in your research and that led you to the book, and some of your key findings. Obviously everyone's got to get the book and look at some of your other resources to get into the weeds, but curious to what you found from that.
Yeah. And I think, the subtitle of the book kind of says all of it too, but it's, it's fix your gut, fix your hormones, the hidden connection your provider's missing, and why you still feel terrible despite normal labs. And that's kind of why I wrote it. But basically what the book does is it just talks you through what is your microbiome. Because I feel like everyone says microbiome, like even in 2024, people will be like, hey, your microbiome. I'm like, yeah, whatever. Like, that's like the stuff that lives in your gut, right? But nobody really, not very many people really understand what is your microbiome, like what does it consist of. And so I just go through and I tell you, what is your microbiome? What does that mean? Where did it come from? Because that's what I wanted to know. I wanted to know, why does everyone's microbiome look terrible? So we talk about, what is it? How do you develop it? What have we done since we've been born that have affected our microbiome? What can we do to make it better? And then I just go in each chapter and I talk about, okay, let's talk about your thyroid. How does your thyroid hormone have anything to do with your gut? If you have things going on in your gut, how does it affect your thyroid hormone, right? And then I talk about insulin. And I talk about cortisol, I talk about estrogen and progesterone and testosterone and DHEA and IGF-1. I just want to give everyone, I tried to do a catch-all. So if you have any hormone issue, you can just go to that part of the book and say, okay, could my gut be affecting this? And it will explain to you from a physiologic standpoint with data and science, science-driven data, what happens to this hormone when your gut is off balance. And what does it mean when your gut is off balance, right? And so I just kind of go through that and I show you how all that's connected from a gut perspective. Then I just put some chapters in there that are the most common hormone issues people have. So there's a whole chapter on PCOS and what that means from a hormone perspective in your gut, on infertility, because I see a lot of people with infertility, and shockingly, unfortunately, I see many, many, many women who have spent $50,000, $100,000 on treatment for infertility, and they come to us and we fix their gut and they get pregnant. And it's heartbreaking, but also a very exciting time for them. And then menopause, like what happens during menopause, perimenopause, and menopause. Women, we have so many changes. A lot of it is your gut. And if you fix your gut, it makes it better. And then I just talk about, what does a gut study look like? What can it show you? And then kind of a 10-step approach to putting it all together, and just things you can do from a lifestyle perspective to make it better. My point of the book, though, was just to teach people, to arm you with information of actually, why does gut health, why can it make all these things different? It was more of like, I just wanted people to know this so that when they have a conversation with their provider, they're not gaslit, or if their provider doesn't know, they could at least go there. I mean, I also wrote it for providers, like, read this book and understand why people are having these hormonal symptoms, and why, although their hormones look good, still they cannot feel well, because I explained from a physiologic standpoint, when your gut's not right, how you get inflammation, how inflammation doesn't let hormones into cells, how when you're inflamed, certain hormones, your T4 doesn't become T3, and how your insulin goes up, and how that affects how your food is stored as fat instead of burned as energy. And I just tried to put it all together in one place where people could understand it. And so that's kind of how the book came out. And I hope that, if people read it, then they'll feel validated and they'll have a different approach to try and get better, especially if they've been unwell for years. And it will help them continue to try to find someone to be in their corner that believes and understands this.
No, that's great too, to like the way you just described, excuse me, the sections, because, I know, like, I don't know if there was another book I was reading, Fiber Fueled, recently. It's,
Mhm.
it's pretty good, but there are certain parts where I'm like, wait, what section am I in? Not that it was a bad writing, but it was just going super deep and then would come back up. But this is nice, like as you described it. At least it fits more like the way I like to learn, like section 1, section 2. So yeah, I think that's really cool how you set that up.
And I tried to put cases in there too, because what I wanted to do too is I picked out like 10 cases that I feel like almost everyone could relate to. And throughout the book, they're sprinkled in different chapters where it's like, okay, this is why this is important. Here's this lady who came to me and I explained, her situation, her symptoms, some of her labs, and then explained like, this is what was going on in her gut. This is why she felt this way. And this is what happened when we did this. So I tried to sprinkle in some cases too, so that you could understand if it's you, to make it validating, because I also know from a patient perspective how validating and upsetting it can be when you go to a doctor and you're like, hey, these are the symptoms I'm having. And they check everything off that it's normal. And then they're like, you're fine. And you're not fine. But a lot of times we just shut down then as a person because we're like, oh, well, the doctor said I'm fine and my labs are fine. And so then you almost start doubting yourself as the patient. And I don't think that's right either, right? It's just that doctor used every tool they knew how to use to make sure you're not dying, which is a good thing, right? Traditional medicine, like, it's not that we don't need it. You don't have cancer, you're not dying. That doesn't mean that you're not having those symptoms and that you should be unvalidated. What that means is now you need to go to a different provider that has different tools that can help you fix them, right? So the analogy I like to use, like Dr. E, I don't know if you know Dr. E, but her and I were having a conversation and she said, if your toilet was broken and you called an electrician and they told you there's nothing wrong with your toilet, but you pee and flush it and it won't flush, that doesn't mean that there's nothing wrong with your toilet. It just means that you didn't find the right person to help you fix the toilet, right? And it doesn't mean that you should get rid of your primary care doctor or the electrician, because you may have an electrical issue at some point. Right. But you've got to find a plumber with the right, specialty and the right understanding to just help fix your situation. And so that's kind of why I wrote this book, because I know there's so many people that just don't feel validated. And there's a lot of providers that just don't know how to put this together either, because not one thing in this book was I taught in medical school, residency, or fellowship. In that first 13 plus years, none of this is really there. It's what I learned after.
No, that's great. And I think leading up to it, I wanted to make the audience aware of a few other things too, because you have some gut health. Oh, my screen didn't follow me. Hold on one second. I messed it up. But I wanted to show you also have some webinars coming up. So which we'll have these in the show notes. I know one of them's coming up in a few days here, which we probably won't have the episode out by then, but also you have some other ones coming up. Are you usually doing them like monthly, or what's the cadence?
I try to do one every month. So the one in March is on the 10th, but we'll have one in April. We'll have one in May. So I try to do one a month, and it's just pop on 45 minutes to an hour. I go through a presentation where I just try to teach people a little bit about their gut and why the symptoms that they're having could be related to their gut. Because the other thing I think we have to realize is we just need education around the fact that a lot of symptoms you have can actually be a gut issue, right? So most people listening to this are going to think, well, I'm not bloated and I'm not constipated and I don't have heartburn, so I can't have a gut issue. That is 100% false. And so in the webinar, I show you 27 or 28 symptoms that all relate back to your gut. Rashes, if you have eczema, if you have brain fog, if you've been told your cortisol is dysregulated, if you have stubborn weight gain, there are things that actually, if you have these things and you've been told everything looks normal, it's probably because you have a gut issue. And so I just try to teach people that on the webinar. And then I've actually found, in looking at thousands of gut studies, that there's kind of 6 different types of guts. It's pretty interesting. And so I talk to people about the different types of guts on the webinar that I see. And I tell people, these are kind of the characteristics of people. This is in the book too. Here are the characteristics of people that have this gut health type. And if you feel like you meet these characteristics, this is what we typically see on your gut study. And this is what could be going on, to also kind of help people really try to hone in and think, okay, could that be me? Because sometimes, it's difficult to get people to truly believe or understand, hey, I could have a gut issue. A lot of times it's because they've seen 4 or 5 providers and they've been blown off and told everything is normal, Right. So I just try to be very relatable to people.
No, that's great. No, appreciate you coming on. I mean, I do want to hit a few other places where people can find you too, while we have the share screen up here, and we'll have a lot of this in the show notes, but um, your Instagram we have. So for those listening on auto, Modern Endocrine and Dr. Cassie M. Smith. And then you also have a podcast as well. So a lot of great stuff going on. You got a lot of free time, it sounds like, in your hands.
I have a ton. Yes. Yeah.
But yeah, no, I think appreciate all the work you're doing, and definitely excited to dive into that. Like I said, our team's gonna definitely just register to go on your wait list. So we're gonna definitely check that out. I'll be looking out for emails once we can pre-order and get that rolling. So I'm excited to see what all is there, because I think you're spot on. I mean, my unmedically trained brain, just reading it, listening to people like yourself and others, and reading and such, it's just mind-blowing. And then actually even seeing it in people's lives, even a fraction, I'm sure, of some of the protocols that a practitioner can do, or someone like yourself is doing, and the impact it has in people's lives is pretty profound. And I think there seems to be a lot more movement in that area. And I also think it's important for people to look at that root cause, pause, work with a practitioner first. Not that there's any ill-intended influencers or products out there to fix the gut, but are they taking them? What I find a lot of times talking to people is, well, it didn't work for me. And it's like, well, what did you do? Like you took a probiotic? Like, okay. But like, I mean, you could have had so many other things, as like going on, that would have been like step 3 or 4. And I think it's just getting people to understand, there's a process, like you just mentioned. Would you say, was it 6 different types of guts?
Yeah, 6 different gut health types.
Gut health types. There you go. And then obviously, as a lot of nuance within those, I'm sure, of differences. So yeah.
And to your point too, like, not saying that anyone's, but if you're just giving someone medications or supplements or whatever to fix their gut, that's fine. But what we really try to focus on too is like, let's tell you why you ended up here, right? And then if we're going to fix this, let's teach you how to not end up here again, right? So not only focusing on your gut, but focusing on, and this is what the whole last chapter of the book is about, focusing on your cells, your cell membranes, making them healthy, focusing on obviously your gut, your hormones, focusing on nutrition, on movement, on sunlight, on sleep, on stress, on relationships, putting all of this together so that you're healing as you're fixing your gut. Because most people who have bad guts have tremendous amounts of stress that got them there at some point, whether the stress resolved or not, stress or trauma. And whether you realize it or not, if your brain senses that you are stressed and you have a million to-do list things, and you're never taking a break, and you're never letting your body feel like it's safe, you're going to have gut issues forever. So we can clean your gut out, and then 3 months later, you're going to have the same gut issues, right? And so just teaching people that, hey, obviously we need to clean this up, we need to fix it, but at the same time, we need to start working on some lifestyle modifications, right? Like, God forbid we do that, then you won't end up here again. And so I think that's important too. That's what, like, you guys work on. That's what I work on. I think that's the difference between a company like us, me and you, versus a influencer on social media that's selling you something and then never talks to you again. Right.
Yeah, no. And I think it's a great point you brought up too. I wanted to kind of high point it is I find a lot of people I talk to will have a traumatic event in life, or they'll go, oh yeah, that was 7 years ago. Where they got therapy or community that helped them through it, and they think just mental. But I think it's really important when you just mentioned about that stress or that trauma that could cascade down to like gut health issues, which could lead to hormone issues, which could lead to other, and just kind of, it's this full circle where it's not all just the mental aspect or the coping that one is doing. There's a lot of other things that could be driving that. So I think it's important for people to kind of, like I said, just pause, call a timeout, do some testing, look at it, work with someone like yourself that isn't, will take the time to dive into the details. And hey, even if you don't fix it, at least you know why you're the way you are, and you're empowered now to make a decision. And when you're ready to, take that jump, you can.
Yeah. And unfortunately, I talk to people about this on the gut health webinar too. Like, If right now you feel like, hey, it's not the right time to fix my gut, I've got too much going on, that's great. But what I tell people too is like, if you don't fix this, ultimately, it will be your only problem, right? So people have 100 problems. And unfortunately, I can say this because I've been in healthcare long enough. People have 100 problems. If you're listening to this right now, we all have problems. We all have things to do. We all have a to-do list. You have one problem. When you get a really significant and serious medical diagnosis, everything else just goes out the window. And I hate that it takes that for people to take their health seriously, but that's kind of how we're like in this country, in this world. That's what we've done. It's like, well, put yourself last, put yourself last, put yourself last. Shit, I have breast cancer. Put myself first. When we should have put our, you know what I mean? And so it's like, your body will only take so much, right? We get one body. We're supposed to treat it like a temple. It will only take so much. And then it will start doing bad things. It will start mutating. It will start, and it just sucks that it takes that for people to put themselves first. So I tell people that say that all the time, you know, well, I have a bunch of gut issues or I have a bunch of hormone issues, but I'm too busy. I'm like, okay, we'll see you later then. You let us know when you need us. We're always here to help. But I hate when, you know, it's under those circumstances. And that's happened before. Like people have come back like, oh my gosh, you were right. Now I have diabetes, or now I have breast cancer. Now I have, and that's not what you want to do. Right.
No, I agree. And I think even speaking, you know, to any men who hear this too, is if it is happening with your significant other, what I've at least experienced, not just with my own wife, but a lot of other women, is just like, they feel guilty putting themselves first a lot of times, especially that parental instinct and those things, to where it's like, hey, you know, but how much better of a community member, mother, sister, daughter, etc., spouse you're going to be if we can pause and clean this stuff up. So yes, you need to be selfish, if you will, for a little bit, which it's really not, but that's what they think. And then, you know, fix some of these things and move forward so it doesn't just keep compounding over time. And that's, yeah, it doesn't go away, you know, to your point, it just gets worse.
And to your point, the word selfish, I don't even like that. I tell people all the time, like, it's not that you're selfish, it's just that you have personal self-respect boundaries, right? Like you're people are going to take from you whatever you'll give them. That's just, it's not, I don't even think that people realize, it's just, that's our nature as humans, right? We're going to take whatever you're going to give. And so you have to be really good with your self-respect boundaries and, you know, set those. And as a mom, as a wife, as a business owner, as a doctor, you know, it's okay to say, like, I tell my husband at 8:30, I'm getting in the bath. That's what I do at night. This is me time. I don't want you to talk to me. I don't want you to, you know, from 8:30 to 9 is me time. And and that's just a boundary that we have. And he respects that because he says, you feel better, you sleep better, you know, whatever. And so you just have to set those boundaries and let the people around you know about those boundaries. And it's not selfish. It's just self-aware. And it's important because, like you said, you can't be a good mom, you can't be a good doctor, you can't be, unless you have those self-care boundaries. And the other thing I tell people too is just like, this is my thing. How cool would it be? Just try to imagine this. How cool would it be if every single human on planet Earth felt 10% better tomorrow? Like, think of just what would happen, like exponentially what that would do, the ripple effect of everyone taking 10% better care of themselves. The better, I mean, just in one day, what would happen? And so I don't know why that's not like society's expectations, because it's not that hard to do 10% better, but it would just, like, it gives me goosebumps thinking about what it would do if everyone would just do 10% better for themselves, for society, right?
Yeah. No, that's a great point. Any other closing thoughts for the group out there?
I don't think so. I'm just, thanks for having me. Like, thanks for listening to us. I mean, I think, you know, you and I agree on the fact that if you have, you know, been sick or seen providers and been made to feel like it's your problem, it's not their problem, or nothing's wrong with you, then just find a different provider. Don't look at it negatively. You don't have to take it personally. Just know that that provider used whatever tools they had in their tool belt. They're probably, you know, you're looking for a plumber and they're an electrician. Don't take it personally. Don't take it offensively. Don't get angry. Just go find somebody else.
Yep.
You know?
No, it's great way to put it. But yeah, and everybody who's viewing the show, we're gonna have everything in the show notes for you. Also, we always encourage everybody, send in your comments, questions. We'll do our best to plug you in with Dr. Smith and her team, and point in the right direction. And if you can't find the links or information, we'll gladly send you that way. And looking forward to, I think it was early April it comes out. So maybe May we'll
April
do
7th.
Yeah. What's that?
April 7th.
April 7th. Yeah. So I think give me a month, and then I'll do a little talk back to the audience about what I learned from the book. So that'll hold me accountable to get it in time.
You have to get it in. Yep.
Yep. No, I'm looking forward to it. I'm looking forward to it. So awesome. Thanks so much for coming on. It was great to get into all this. I could easily steal the rest of your day, but I'm sure everyone else will pull you away before I do. So
thank you for having me. I appreciate what you do too.
All right. We'll see you guys. Take care.